And we're back. Let's see. Yeah, coffee has a bad tendency of causing nature breaks to happen frequently. But as the desktop shows, Programmer, a tool for converting caffeine into code, which is exactly what we're doing today. Anyhow, let's get some stuff back up here so we can mess with some more stuff. Thank you very much, Sky. It was complaining that this was modified by another application, which is true because every time the Minecraft server starts up, it rewrites the server properties. Now, there was one thing that I wanted to change on the ini-file class, because I would like to have it a little more streamlined towards general use than it being specifically for Minecraft related stuff. That's why I put it in the config tools namespace instead of in the Minecraft namespace. The thing that I wanted to change here was the flag that we have in here somewhere. Should be right here. Minecraft server properties. Since the Minecraft server.properties file closely resembles a regular old school ini file, but doesn't have a group, we need to effectively create a virtual group that we can store the individual key value pairs in. So I think I will start by renaming this to be virtual grouping instead. There we go. And then we need to find the let's see, we'll do a private const string virtual group name and change that to $virtual instead. There we go. And then we need to, of course, replace all these with the new name of it, which would be virtual grouping right here. And down here somewhere, grab the next one, virtual grouping, and here, virtual grouping, and finally here, virtual grouping. There we go. And then we need to find these two and replace them with the virtual group name. So let's do the Minecraft here, replace this with virtual group name, and the other one right here equals virtual group name. There we go. And that should be it. All done. And just for the sake of it, it's not what I wanted to do. Changed the Minecraft server properties to virtual grouping. Added virtual group name for reference. There we go. All right. And since we don't need any of these, we might as well remove them. There we go. Now, at the moment, the main form thing still checks for server properties somewhere, which means we will, of course, get an error here. So we'll go in and change this to do the virtual grouping instead. There we go. Now, this is only for the current info button. which basically just pops a message box with the MOTD, the Archon port, and the Archon password. Now, for any of this to, how should I put this, be a little more secure than it currently is, we can add in a random code generator that generates some randomized password that we can then write to the server properties file before starting up the server. Doing a random code generator is not particularly difficult. It effectively just needs some kind of randomizer and then grabbing some characters from some kind of constant. So for the sake of starting the upgrade of our server host class, we might as well start putting stuff in here. We still don't have the means to actually stop it. We need the Archon for that, but it's something that we will take a look at later. For now, let's see if we can open up the internal helper methods and add another one, which we shall call generate password. Private string, generate password. We could even specify a length. Doesn't really matter. However, we do need some kind of stuff to put in there. So we'll do a constant, call it letters, and go through whatever. The order doesn't really matter as long as we get all of it. Like this. We could do them alphabetically, it doesn't really matter. All that matters is that we put some kind of randomizer up here. And for that purpose, we definitely need a randomizer. So let's do RNG equals new random, grab the current date time, milliseconds as the seed for it, and then we need some kind of result. Stuff it in there, and then we'll do a loop. Let's put, I don't know, 25 characters in there. That should be fine. And then we shall do, let's see, the length of this one, blah, 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 blah. Let's do index equals 0, while index less than 1 or greater than letters.length. Let's see. Yeah, we'll do this. Index equals rng.next. Start at 1 and end at letters.length. This should give us at least one random position, and then we'll simply just grab the character at the position of index -1 since it's 0 based. Letters index -1, and we should be good. Return result. All done. Now our server host has the option to generate a password, which of course we will need for setting up a randomized password for the authentication on the Archon setup. But we also need to add Archon support, remote console support, into this class so we can properly control the server. So let's have a look at that. Stuff it in here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Remote console support. There we go. And then we need to implement the actual console. So let's do the source remote console, call it Archon. Import the namespace for it, equals new source remote console. There we go. And just like before, we need to initialize it, hook the events and so on. And since we have already done that in the main form, we might as well just steal the code from there. Which would be down here somewhere. Right here. So let's grab this. And then we can afterwards just remove all of the UI references and stuff that we don't really need. There we go. Put that in here and do all the cleanup stuff. Alright. Now that we are effectively not exactly running in a UI thread, we don't exactly need to do any kind of invocation because there are no UI elements to update. So we can actually get rid of all this stuff now. There we go. And here, force a disconnect. And here we need to handle that we are authenticated. To do add whatever is needed after we've connected. Connect fails, make sure it disconnects, which it already should. So we actually don't need this. Maybe. Authentication failed. To do handle authentication failures will force a disconnect. So archon.disconnect. There we go. And the server response. Definitely need this. Handle incoming server responses. And this one to do handle other cleanup as needed. We have the initialization stuff ready for us right here, and we shall need to put that to use. Now, since we don't really need to do specific cleanup and shutdown of the remote console, we will simply just hook the events right here in the constructor of the server host class. There we go. Now that we have that in place, we can then figure out whether this is actually running. Blah, 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 blah. And let's see, do we have a property that determines whether it's running or not? No, we don't. So why don't we add in a property that indicates whether it's actually running or not. So let's do that. Running. And this will be a flag, so a boolean. And we'll see what's required to know whether it's running or not. We may need a variable to handle that for us. Let's see, do we have a... That should actually be in here. Yep, this one starts the thread, so we should actually set the... actually, no, we will just do a check on the server thread. If... actually, we don't need that, we can just return server thread doesn't equal null. If it's running, the server thread is an actual thread object. If it's shut down, it will eventually become null. So this should suffice to tell us whether it's running. Flag that indicates whether the Minecraft server is running. There we go. And of course, as previously, we can use the server host events to track the startup progress as well as the shutdown progress. One thing that we may want to do is to add in a, let's see, on server started, add in a call to the Archon to attempt a connection once the server started event has triggered. Likewise, whenever the server is about to shut down, we may want to signal the Archon to disconnect. So we will throw that in right now. Whoops. If Archon is connected, then disconnect. Tell Archon to disconnect if it's running. There we go. Here we probably want to set up a property that determines whether we should start the Archon or not, since we actually need it to properly control the server. That's basically something that we will have to forcibly put in there. But we also need to add in options to control how the Archon configuration works. And to do this, we should add a couple of more properties to it. See, at the moment we have the server path, we have the server jar, we have a flag indicating whether it's running, how much memory to set aside, and we also have an ID for the server host instance, so we can keep track of it. But we need to set up, let's see, Archon remote, that would be right here, property, remote console port, which of course will be an integer. Remote console port equals 20. What was the default again? Let's have a look. Default port is 25575. So let's default to that. There we go. Public remote console port. Return this. Blah. There we go. and just like the other properties in here, we don't want them changed if the server is running. So we need to check whether it's currently locked before we make that change. If not locked and the value passed is greater than 1024, because 1024 is the last system reserved TCP IP port, and value less than 65536, which is the maximum port number available on a TCP connection. Then we set the port here equals value. There we go. Some kind of description. Indicates the port number to use for remote console access to the Minecraft server. There we go. Alright, we've now set the console port. We probably also want to use some kind of indicator, whether to use randomized passwords at every startup or a fixed password. So for the purpose of putting in a specific password, if we want to use that, we will create another property called remote console password. There we go. And we will do a string for that. Set it to nothing to begin with. There we go. And again, this is something that we don't want to be configurable while the server is actually running. So we'll do a check to ensure that we are not locked. Then we will ensure that whatever password might be sent here to the property has a length without spaces that's greater than 0. If it does, then we shall store this password. And since this property is being assigned a fixed password, we also need to revert the use randomized password flag. So we will get back to this shortly. Indicates the password to use for authentication by means of remote console. There we go. And then we'll go down here, add another property to it. Property use randomized Archon password. Cut it out. There we go. And by default, we'll disable it. Set up the property for it so we can both get and set the flag. There we go. Again, this is something that we don't want to be changeable while we are in lockdown mode. So we'll make sure that we're not locked. And then we shall set the flag. And if this is set true, then we will clear the password up here. There we go. Indicates whether to use randomized remote console passwords. There we go. Now that we have this variable, we can then replace this with false. And there we go. Alright, so now that we have Archon remote console support, part of the startup process should also include a check to figure out whether we potentially have a valid Archon port as well as a valid password that we can use for this. So if we do have valid settings, then we can allow the server to be started. If we don't, then we need to basically abort the process and have the start method return false. So first of all, let's do a quick check here to figure out whether we have a valid Archon configuration. Since we effectively only need to do it here, there's no need for extra methods to figure this out. Valid Archon config. We'll default that to false. Then first of all, we need to figure out whether the Archon password should be randomized, or if we should use the static pre-configured one. So let's see if this one is randomized, and if it is not, then we need to check that the remote console password has a length greater than 0. If we're using the randomized version of it, then we can assume that it's valid. If the past or set remote console password is empty, then valid Archon config will still remain false, but if it has a length greater than 0, then we'll assume that it's valid as well. And here we are doing a check to ensure that we have a server path, that we have a reference to which jar to use, and further on we're doing a check to ensure that the jar actually exists in the path that was specified. So here we will also check that the Archon config is correct, and if the file, the jar exists and the Archon config is correct, then we'll start up the server. Okay. One thing more that we need to do before actually starting up the server is that we need to update the server properties file. For this, we will create another method that oops, I actually forgot to returns true if the startup was successful, otherwise false. There we go. Okay. Now if this one is valid, then update server properties. This one we need to create. What this will do is it will load in the server properties file and refresh the Archon settings or add them if they don't exist. And that is something that we can do where? Let's see. We should probably throw that in the internal helper methods. So let's put it here. Update server properties. There we go. All right. Now, this particular method, since we already have a brilliant class that can handle ini files for us, including the server properties file, we might as well make use of that. So let's grab the ini file, ini, and import the namespace for it. There we go. Equals new ini file, and we'll just leave it at that. Actually, let's do the if file exists var server path plus server.properties, then load it up right away. No, actually, we can't load it up right away because we still need to set this to use virtual grouping first. Now, wouldn't it be nice if we could just specify the file name and the virtual grouping for it? Why don't we make an addition to the class constructor that will then allow us to do so. Path name, virtual grouping. There we go. And grab this, grab that, and set the virtual grouping to that one. Nice. Now we can. Let's go over here. Grab this one, followed by true. Nice. So much easier. Alright. Now that we have it, all we need to do is update those specific, let's see, those specific entries, which would be the, let's see, archon.password, archon.port, and the enable Archon, which is in here somewhere, right there, as well as broadcast Archon to ops. So, let's start with the set value. We don't have a group because we're running with virtual grouping. Let's go over here and set the enable Archon to true. There we go. Let's set the Archon port, which is archon.port there, which would then be the remote console port, and we need to convert it into a string. Set value, and the password, which is right here. Whoops, there. And then I didn't ask you to put, there we go. Okay, so this we need to do differently, because right here we have given users of this particular class the option to either use randomized passwords or a single static password. So we need to figure out which of the two we need to put in there. The final thing that we need to update in the server properties file is the broadcast thing. Broadcast Archon to ups. There we go. Let's force this to true whenever this particular launcher is running, just to give the the server owner some kind of control over what's going on, or at least the ability to monitor it. Alright, now that these are updated, at least to some extent, we can save it. There we go. Now here, like I stated in the comment, we need to do this differently because we have two different password options. And to keep things synchronized, we will add a local variable here that deals with the actual Archon password that's chosen. So we'll do Archon password, set that to empty to begin with. The current password in use for remote console. There we go. So we'll grab a copy of this and then simply use that as the password right here. And this then takes care of updating the server properties file. Pretty nifty that we can do it this way. One more thing that we might want to do is whenever the server shuts down, we may want to update the server properties file and effectively remove these two. Disable the Archon and revert the broadcast Archon to ops back to false. Strictly speaking, we could potentially just delete the broadcast Archon to ops entry, but I kind of like to keep things nice and neat, so I think I'll just revert it back to false, just like the enable Archon flag will be. But to figure out what kind of updating we need to do, we'll add a flag in here that goes enable Archon. There we go. And with this we can then go through enable Archon and put stuff in there or clear stuff as needed. So we shall put the initialization stuff in here. Now it's enabled, and then we will grab these again because we need to update at least this one and this one, and then we need to see about deleting these two. And luckily we actually have a remove key from this particular group, so we can actually just replace this and then remove the third argument like this, and we're done. Nice. And of course now it's complaining that we're not putting in the proper arguments in the previous call to this method, so we'll go and do that. Good afternoon, Sir Pinwheel. Good to see you again. Alright, let's get a bit of documentation in here. Updates the server.properties settings with blah 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 remote console settings. Whoops. Blah 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 blah. When set true, remote console will be enabled, allowing control of the server. When false, removes the Settings. Disables Archon and removes the settings. Yeah, should be good enough. Let's go down here. Since this is during the startup process, we definitely want it to enable Archon here. So let's do that. And somewhere along the process, we also need to place a call to clean up the server properties again. However, before we do this, we actually need to correctly initialize the password that will be written to the server properties. So let's do a quick check to see which one we need to use. Actually, we can do that up here. If a randomized password is chosen, then we will do the Archon password and get one from the generator we created earlier. And if we have a static declared password, we will simply grab a copy of that. Archon password equals remote console password. There we go. And just to keep things neat and clean, we shall start by clearing out that password. There we go. Now we have the means to pre-configure the Archon stuff. We have the means to have it modify the server properties file to properly reflect the Archon settings. We still need the means to clean up after the server has stopped. So let's go do that right about here. Clean up the server properties after run has completed. So again, we call the update server properties, and this time we do it with a false indication, which removes the Archon port as well as the Archon password and resets the enable Archon to false, as well as the broadcast Archon to ops will also be set to false. There we go. Alright. We still need to fire up the remote console. We still need to do that right about here. We know that the Archon listener thread from looking at the logs. Let's go grab the latest one right here. As you can see, we get the done for help type help or question mark. The next line in the log is the server indicating that it is starting up the remote control listener, and the result is that we get another log entry telling us that it's now up and running. Just like we did before, we can actually have our output monitor look for this particular line, which we can then use to trigger Archon to connect to the server, so we can start controlling it. So, like we have done before, we will put in a little bit of text parsing to figure out whether it's up and running or not. Okay. Let's go grab the log entry quick. We know that it will spew a message of Archon running on, finishing off with the port number. So we can use this to verify that the server is actually running on the port that we expect. Alright, so to do that, we first need to figure out whether the log message actually contains the text that we are looking for. So let's do that quick. This would be if it contains this. So instead of doing equals to, we shall do an index of and add in the text. If it's greater than -1, then there's a good chance that it's actually running. And just to be on the safe side, we don't know if this particular text could change at some point. It might, we have no idea, so we'll just do a to lower first and then do these in all lowercase. There we go. Alright. Since we know that it in the logs actually posts the IP that it's bound to as well as the port, we will see if we can actually split the port and compare it to the port that's configured. So let's see if we can grab that. Do this. If log message, well, it actually should have, so let's just do it directly. Because we know that log message, no, hang on a sec, we are doing it past the close bracket colon, so it might not contain a colon in there. We'll do a check. If log message index of colon is greater than -1, meaning there is at least one instance, then port info equals, do it here, log message substring, let's start at the last index of a colon occurrence +1, and then we'll subtract that from the length of the log message. There we go. Then we'll do port here and see if we can actually parse that into an integer. If not, int try parse port info out port. Then we'll simply just fix it back to 0. If port equals mvar remote console port, then we can now safely assume the server is listening for Archon connections. So start the Archon. Alright. Now, since this launcher runs on the exact same computer as the server runs at, we don't exactly need to bind any specific IP. So we will simply just have Archon connect to, and this is actually becoming a little bit annoying, so I think I would like to make one addition to the Archon class. Let's go over here, down the bottom, and find the connect method. See, I would like to be able to just specify a byte array here, so that the source remote console internally converts it to a proper IP address accordingly. So we'll do an overload, public void connect byte IP int server port and string auth password. There we go. And then we'll simply do a quick check. If ip.length equals 4, then place a call to connect. creating a new IP address. Since we already have the namespaces imported here, we can specify the numeric byte array IP that we want to connect to, and then just pass the other ones along. There we go. And this is pretty much the same thing, so let's grab whatever documentation from here we can, and then just change the one that's different. There we go. A 4-byte array containing the IP to connect to. There we go. Job done. Cool. Now we can do this instead. New byte, indicate localhost. There we go. And add in the remote console port as well as the Archon password that was previously selected. Okay. Now, the Archon password was initialized in the start method right here. So it's either empty, has a random password in it, or the chosen static password. So this should be fine. This attempts the connection, and through the events we can then figure out whether that connection was successful or not. So let's see if we can do something about that. All right. Connected. This occurs the instant the TCP/IP connection is made. The authenticated event triggers once the authentication succeeds. We also have an authentication failed, which instantly disconnects the Archon. We can get some server responses, disconnected, blah 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 blah. For now, we will simply do a check in the stop method that we have not yet created. But we will do that right here. Public void stop. We will add in some more methods so we can actually control the server directly on the server host instance instead of having to do all the other trimmings individually. So let's see if we are running, which is a property that tells us whether the server is running. If this is the case and our Archon is connected, then we will attempt to execute a stop command to the server. And this should now allow us to go back on the main form and put some stuff into this event. Nice. Let's see if we can get some of this working just for the sake of it. There we go. Minecraft server.stop. This calls the stop method in the server host, which then has the remote console execute the stop command, which should then trigger the server to shut down. Let's see what happens. There we go. I'll put this here. We know that it still pops the GUI for it. The reason I'm leaving that in there is so we still have some means of controlling it while we're still building all this stuff. Alright, let's start it up and see what happens. And nothing happened. Absolutely nothing happened. Huh. Interesting. Oh, yeah. I may need to restart my Visual Studio quick. It has become a little bit sluggish for whatever reason. Grab this again. There we go. Alright. Just need to do a little bit of checking. That one should be fine. This one should be fine. Let's go in here and go through the start and see what happens. There is a reason this isn't starting, and the reason is that as you will see in a moment, locals. Okay, so use randomized Archon password is false, and the set password is empty, which prevents the server from starting. So, to get past this particular issue, we need to update the main form a little bit. So when we do the start, we should probably make sure that the Minecraft server has a remote console port specified. We used, let's see, 26,665. So let's use that. There we go. And we also want to have it use a randomized password every time. So let's do that. This is now enough to configure this server host instance named Minecraft server to be properly configured. It gets the path to where the Minecraft server resides, the name of the jar, how much memory to set aside, and all of the remote console stuff is also configured. So we should be able to start it up now. Let's see if we actually can. And that would be this one. Boom. Holy smokes. Snap. And here's the server. And as you can see, Archon running on blah. And we should also have the Archon running internally within the server host class. And just to check and see, we shall see if this doesn't matter. This one we do want to reload. So, no. Alright. Broadcast Archon to ups is set true. Enable Archon is set true. We did get a different password this time. So it actually correctly generated a new password for us. One thing that we can add to the password generator is to grab a number of random characters within the password and do them uppercase instead of strictly lowercase. It's something that we can mess with. And here is the port set up correctly. Now let's see what happens if we actually execute the stop button. Boom, server shuts down. Both threads have exited correctly. One of them is the Archon thread, the other one is the actual Minecraft thread. So, something is definitely working. Pretty cool. Alright, now that we have all of this stuff integrated, one change that we might want to make is to actually check here if start succeeded or not. So if this doesn't succeed, then message box show some configuration mismatch prevented the server from starting. Please check the configuration and try again. Thank you very much. Unable to start Minecraft server. I'll put a OK button in there, and we'll put a exclamation in there. All right. Okay. So today we have accomplished creating a fully configurable remote console class, which allows us to remotely access a Minecraft server's console, complete with internal authentication handling, which are exposed through a number of events. It has an internal protocol, both methods for both generating the network packets as well as retrieving them and converting them into data we can use. We've successfully run some tests on it to ensure that it actually does work, and tests have been positive. We've also managed to add in this new remote console class into our existing server host class, which handles starting up the actual server, monitoring the console output, and triggering events according to startup process as well as shutdown processes, which allow us to, through simple events, control the actual UI of our current server launcher. All right. One more thing that we did was that we made a few changes to the generalized inifile class. We changed the Minecraft server properties into virtual grouping instead. We also added an internal label for virtual groups. This just assists the inifile class in reading and writing a server properties file correctly. So there we have it. The next step would then be to determine what kind of extra features we would like to throw into our server host class. Say, for example, if we wanted to add in an execute command allowing us to execute console commands. Another thing that would be nice to have eventually is if we can modify our, let's see, where is it? This part, which is the output monitor, the console output monitor that comes from Java, all of that handling. It would be neat if we could modify this to be able to see stuff like, let's see if this one has it. No, this one doesn't have it yet. But it would be neat if we could have it look for players joining and disconnecting, and then updating, say, a list of players, including their individual account GUIDs as needed, That way we could potentially expose the list of currently online players to the actual front-end UI should we need to say, for example, execute a ban command or a kick command, or if we wanted to do some private messaging, we could add that into the server host class to give those kind of options. So there are plenty of things that we can put in here. However, I'm kind of reaching the end of my battery capacity for today, so I think I will stop babbling and open up the chat for questions, requests, whatever you might want to throw in there. Feel free to shoot away, and let's see what we can accomplish. In terms of updating the source code for this on GitHub today, I will unfortunately have to postpone it a couple of hours because I would like to go through the code as it is and get all of the documentation properly updated. Maybe put in some extra documentation in both the ini file class as well as the source remote console. One thing that I would like to put in there is embed the links to the two wiki pages that I have been using today that describe the Archon protocol. And that's something I would like to do before I push the update to GitHub. But I will definitely make sure that it's updated later today. Yes, absolutely. Feedback is more than welcome. Is there anything I can do better? Anything I should change? Anything. Any kind of feedback is definitely welcome. Well, the fun part of C++ pretty much is only limited to your imagination. Um, Depending on what kind of development environment you're using, some of them may help you along the way a lot more than others. The very nice thing about working with the .NET framework is that Microsoft does actually throw in a crap ton of assistance tools to make you or to assist you in developing your code a lot faster. So, but that aside, keep in mind that you can actually get C# compilers for both Mac OS and different Linux distributions. So you don't exactly have to sit on a Windows platform to develop C#. Hence why Unity built games are capable of compiling across platforms. Today has been a lot of complex stuff for sure. Working with network protocols and data conversion and getting things right. Yeah, it's complicated stuff, and you definitely need to stick with your focus to get through it. We had a lot of good documentation to help us along the way. So that's super. Definitely, if you need to do something like this, go do proper research. don't just accept the first two hits on Google on the specific topic, especially when it comes to network protocols. If you can find an RFC, request for comments, kind of document that describes the network protocol, then you have basically struck gold. They are the de facto standards for how network protocols work declared and how they are declared. So definitely do the research before you start. If you need to create your own protocol for server-client communication, then of course you need to define that all on your own. And then I would definitely recommend that you document every single step of the protocol declaration for your own sake. You may, while you're working with it, have it all in your head, but give it 2 weeks and you've forgotten how that protocol is put together. So document, document, and document. Thank you very much for the follow. All right. As mentioned, I'll get this updated on GitHub. The today's stream will be available on my Twitch channel later, and I will also get the individual segments uploaded to my YouTube channel and get the README for this particular project updated accordingly on GitHub. Links to the two projects that I've done so far are available in the first panel on my Twitch channel, as well as a link to one of the two wiki pages that I have been using today. So, with that, I will throw a huge thank you to everyone who joined today. It has been an absolute pleasure putting some new code out there, and it's been great seeing everyone. So thank you very much.